of time, I urge you to take a look at the credentials of this person in your parent handbook. Ken is really the advocate's advocate on these issues, and it's really, I'm very proud to have him here today to talk to you, Ken Campbell.
Multiple,
that one, here, everyone here.
okay, hopefully people will be able to hear me, and because you won't have to listen to me very long. I understand that my job, my role, my capacity here today is to try to make you aware of your rights to a degree and ways in which you can acquire things that you need. And primarily, I'll start with the ADA very quickly. The Americans with Disabilities Act. Everybody's familiar with the title, right? Is everybody familiar with all the nuances and how that works? Part of what was talked about previously is part of an ADA issue. In the schools, for example, IDEA talks about the education that people are receiving. ADA issues in the school are, can the kid get up on the stage? Can the kid get to the chemistry class on the third floor? Those are ADA issues in your school system. Access to the program is an ADA issue. The program content in terms of how the individual is educated is an IDEA issue, okay? The ADA has multiple parts, and the basic bottom line is that people with disabilities are guaranteed civil rights under the ADA, and that includes access to services, access to, an example. I want to take my family shopping somewhere, and I can't get through the aisles in that location in my wheelchair. That is a violation of the ADA, okay? Access to a place that's open to the general public is guaranteed, whether that's access by virtue of physical access, like I've talked about in relation to the wheelchair, or whether that's access by virtue of the manner in which services are delivered. If you're communicating with someone who has a visual impairment, you do that differently than if you're communicating with someone who has a hearing impairment. There are ways to make products and services available that are all part of the accommodation process that everybody who is open for business is required to provide. Now, and there are employment requirements. I know that this group is primarily interested in family type situations and probably not the employment section. But when you talk about what the ADA's purpose is, it's to make the environment in which we live open to everybody. So that whether it's a private business or whether it's a public service such as your trash collection or anything else that the city might do, those are all supposed to be open and available to anyone. Handicap parking is supposed to be available at all entities that are open to the general public. Offices, real estate officers, barber shops, you name it. In terms of private business, there's one option that people have, and that is that if becoming compliant with the ADA would put the business out of business, they're not required to do it. If the business is so small and it's only making a tiny amount of money, just tell them that they've got to put a $50,000 ramp out front to let the one person in their community that might use it in to get their services isn't going to fly, because it would put the small business out of business. So that's not required under the legislation. What's required is, and oh, by the way, under that same legislation, if you have expenses as a business to make your business accessible, you go to Kroger and you see all these carts that Kroger purchased, okay, to allow people to ride around in their aisles with the little baskets on the front of the carts. And you think, gee, that was nice of Kroger. Well, actually, you can say, gee, thank you, federal government, because that's a tax credit, not a tax deduction. You know the difference between a deduction and a credit? Credit means you figure out what you owe the government, and then you deduct the exact dollar amount that you spent from what you owe the government when you figure up your taxes. Those kinds of purchases to accommodate someone in a place like a store that's open to the general public are purchases that become tax credits, up to $10,250 per year for any business that goes to any expense to accommodate for folks like me and folks like some of your family members that might need some kind of an accommodation in an environment that's open to the general public. There are communication devices the fourth sector of the ADA talks about making sure that you have text telephones or a relay service in place for folks that have either speech or hearing problems and they can't effectively use a regular phone. They can use a relay system that allows them to type a message into one end of the phone. It is then voiced by an operator. The person on the other end speaks back. The operator types the message in and it prints out on a text telephone. So if you have a speech impairment situation or a hearing impairment situation, you still have access to phone services. Those are the kinds of things that are covered and the intent, at least, of the ADA. And trying to be all things to all people, I'm going to move rather rapidly and try to encourage communication with you about issues or concerns you might specifically have after we get through talking about a couple other things. I want to talk to you now about Medicaid services. And this book that's been distributed, this is Ohio's Medicaid system. It's very similar to everybody else's Medicaid system. Key element of Medicaid is that you have a Medicaid state plan. And what is covered in your Medicaid state plan is what you get by way of services. It's not the same in every state. Okay? Medicaid is not a program that says, this is what you will offer, state. It's a program that says you can devise a Medicaid state plan and determine what services you will offer to folks that are on Medicaid. And in doing that, you have input. You have, there's the agency in your state that's responsible. In this state, it's the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. In other states, it's maybe a Human Services Department. But you have a Medicaid agency in your state. They put together the state plan. They have hearings on that state plan. If you've got Medicaid and you're not getting something covered that you need to have covered, and it's because it's not a covered service in your state, get to that state planning activity and get to that hearing room and let them know what it is you need so that changes can be made in what's covered in your state in Medicaid. Now this document really, I think, is very simple and very helpful in that it tells you what Medicaid is. It tells you the intent of Medicaid as far as being a healthcare system. It talks about the coverages that Medicaid has. It talks about eligibility, the fact that it's an income-based program, the fact that you can't have more than a certain amount of assets and remain eligible for the program. It talks about your rights of appeal when you deal with Medicaid agencies. If they say make one decision and you don't like it, it tells you how to go about appealing that decision. I think an area that I wanted to point at was the durable medical equipment piece on page 7 of the document, just as an example of what this talks about. Medical equipment that can be covered under your Medicaid plan. If you're eligible for Medicaid and if you have applied and received your Medicaid card, then these are all examples of things that if they are in your state's Medicaid state plan, your Medicaid card will cover the expenses for. And then you have, later on in this document, you have a discussion of Medicaid waivers. And in Ohio, the ones that they talked about are 4 different kinds of waivers: a home care waiver, individual options waiver, residential facilities waiver, and a passport waiver. Now, those types of waivers, service, it tells you in each of those 4 pages, which are pages 14, 15, 16, and 17, who the waiver is for, what services are covered under that waiver, and all this material is available from your state Medicaid office. So that if you wonder if you're eligible for Medicaid, but you don't know if you're eligible for a waiver, if waiver services would be helpful to you, these descriptions of the waivers that are available can be gotten from your state Medicaid office, and that will let you know exactly how to go about proceeding and whether or not it's appropriate for you to try to get on a Medicaid waiver. Now, getting on Medicaid and getting general Medicaid services because you're income eligible and you have a disability and you've been determined to be a Medicaid recipient is much easier than getting on a Medicaid waiver, because Medicaid waivers are, in essence, exceptions to the rule that provide special things that are limited in size. There are a certain number of approved slots, and so they will go quickly. If you think you want on a particular waiver, you need to get on a waiting list for that waiver, typically in most states. There may be states right now that have some open waiver slots, but they go more quickly and they're more specific. And so if you see a waiver that you like, you might want to get on a waiting list in your state to make sure you get that waiver option when it becomes available and more slots open up, which they typically do. One other thing that I brought with me that I wanted to at least talk to you about is in the acquisition of durable medical equipment or assistive technology of any sort, there's been, at least in this state, through the Ohio Legal Rights Service, the development of an assistive technology advocacy and funding manual. And this manual, they didn't have enough in print for me to bring copies for everyone at the moment, but Ohio Legal Rights Service offers it, and it's put together with the what is now called AT Ohio, Assistive Technology Ohio, and each state has an assistive technology grant or unit that's funded through federal government assistive technology funding. In this state, one of the things that AT Ohio does is offer a low-interest loan program, so that if you choose to invest in a piece of equipment and you're not eligible for Medicaid, or it's not covered under your particular state's Medicaid program, then you can get a low-interest loan. It's a revolving loan fund that what happens is people draw out the money, they pay an exceptionally low rate of interest over a protractedly long period of time, but the money returns back to the original source and the interest builds over time, so the fund actually grows the more it's used. And so that revolving loan fund allows people to purchase things and gain equipment that they might not otherwise be able to get. That's one way of that Ohio's AT unit has tried to expand the availability. There are numerous sources of this kind of equipment that come into play. There are private entities that will assist you with the acquisition of equipment, such as Lions clubs, any service club, JC's, Kiwanis, whatever you might happen to have in your local area. They're quite often willing to take on a project. If you want to do work in your home to make changes to make it more adaptable, HUD has programs available through your local CMHA, Columbus, in this case it'd be Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, but the local Metropolitan Housing Authority has programs available through HUD that allow you to renovate your home with their assistance in order to adapt to the kinds of concerns you might have or will have to deal with at some point in the future. So what I guess I'm trying to say, as rapidly as I possibly can, is that there are a variety of things to turn to in every state. The AT situation, private sources of grants, etc. Your legal rights, Ohio Legal Rights is our protection and advocacy agency. If you feel your rights have been violated in acquiring anything, the Medicaid program, and of course the rights that you're guaranteed under the ADA. And so there's quite a broad package of protections that you have, along with resources that can be mostly acquired through contacts with your Medicaid agency or the legal rights agency, protection and advocacy agency in your state. And noting that you were already over time before I started, I decided I would try to condense my comments and leave you with the books, and also be open to questions that might be stimulated by our conversation regarding your circumstances, in the hopes that I might be able to help somebody find something they're looking for. So with that, are there questions or concerns? Did I raise anything that didn't make sense?
Are all the 800 numbers in here just for Ohio?
Yes. Yes, those are 800 numbers that are Ohio specific. Yes, sir.
What is your advice about dealing with HMOs, especially when they deny services based on what the contract says? Because I think we run into that a lot.
It's an interesting question, in that it is not a violation of the ADA in terms of an HMO to have a contract with as the provider agency and to restrict its services to the details of that contract. If you're Medicaid eligible, sometimes it's better to be on your Medicaid plan than it is to be operating through an HMO, because Medicaid coverages typically cover things that HMOs don't and provide better coverage. So finding ways to become Medicaid eligible, one of them is spend down. If you have eligible income that's over the limit for Medicaid, if you then spend down that additional money each month to get yourself to inside the income requirements, the income and asset requirements of your Medicaid program, then you can gain better access. As far as dealing with an HMO, I would assume that the HMO is provided to you through an employer, and that my dealings, if it were me, would be with my employer to say that my coverage is not sufficient to cover my needs as your employee, and would appreciate them negotiating with the HMO to change that contract language, which they do on an annual basis anyway, typically the wrong direction. But if they value their employees, I've known employers to actually say, well, that shouldn't cost us anymore, and we could see that expanding that would be a benefit to keeping our employees and keeping them on the job, and actually negotiate on your behalf. Individual negotiations with HMOs, I've never known to work. They never have for me anymore. Yeah.
I'm interested in understanding more about the HUD program. We live in Colorado, and we've always adapted our home to make it handicap accessible in, but never done anything for bathrooms. And we've always paid for it, but I'm curious, with the HUD program, is that somehow associated with Medicaid, or is
No.
it's separate,
No,
and then you apply for it?
It's a housing authority
Okay.
piece.
And so you apply for that, and then they can accept it or
They
deny it?
can give
or-
you a certain amount of money, and it wouldn't vary state to state because it's a federal program. I think it's $10,000 that towards the
bathroom
right
adaptation?
towards adaptations of your home if you own the home, and so it's something to check on. A lot of people don't know about that program. That was one that was news to me. Again, our legal rights organization did a study on all of the Section 8 and all of the programs offered by HUD, and that was one of the ones included and mentioned in that package. So there is a home revisions program that you could be eligible for those dollars. Now, typically HUD eligibility has to do with your assets and income levels. So if you don't match up with the requirements to receive housing assistance for that particular program, you wouldn't be eligible. But if you can demonstrate a need, then it might be the program for you.
Now, does that work where you find the contractors, or do you have to go through a bureaucracy of them contracting it out and waiting for...
The way it's designed is to provide you with the resources to handle the expenses. They're not working off of a selected contractor list. Okay? Yeah.
What do you mean by spend down so that you qualify for Medicaid?
Okay.
We were both wondering.
It's in your book.
Okay.
It's described in the book, and that probably does it better than I can. If you make more money than you are supposed to make in order to qualify for Medicaid, but it's not a whole lot more, then you can show them that you're spending money in certain specific ways that are acceptable to them, and getting down to their cutoff point to be eligible. So, if you're making $1,000 more, then you probably aren't going to use spend down to get to eligibility. But if you're $200 or $300 over, you could use spend down to get to a level of eligibility and use the Medicaid program that way. Other questions?
Ken, the Assistive Technology Ohio, is there a website or contact? Because you said they're national.
You know,
Each state.
there's one in each state, and I know where the Assistive Technology Ohio entity is located. It's on Ohio State University's campus for Ohio. I don't know their website, and this publication was put together long enough ago that it doesn't include the website.
Okay. If I go through the Ohio Legal Rights Service, would they be able to?
I can give you the phone number for AT Ohio.
Okay.
It's 292-2426, and that's area code 614. So for Ohio, that's the assistive technology federally funded entity that should be able to give you a substantial amount of information about what's available. And each state has one of those federally funded operations. Yes.
How does the ADA apply to non-public schools?
To private schools, if the private school is open to the public in the sense that they will take any applicant that pays the fee, then they're covered. If it's a religious entity that you must be a part of that religious belief in order to enter that school, then they're not covered. Okay? It's purely a matter of who it's open to. If it's a private school that if you have the money, you can buy your way in, they're covered by the ADA.
Are there programs similar to the HUD program for your personal house? Like if you go to a school and say, we need a bathroom renovated for wheelchair accessibility, are there places for schools to go to that you can help direct them to help them get that change incorporated?
It's called passing a levy.
Okay.
I mean,
All
no,
right.
they're a tax generating entity, so nobody's going to come to their aid. They can generate the taxes to pay the bills they need to pay, and they can't operate without having paid the bills they need to pay. I shouldn't say nobody. I mean, in the sense of computers, there are numerous computer companies that have provided computers to schools. But as far as renovations, typically any construction project becomes a capital expenditure for the school, and I'm not aware of successful things other than fundraisers that maybe families have volunteered to join in on to try to raise those capital dollars. That's been done effectively. Going to foundations typically doesn't work for agencies that can pass a levy and get the resources they need, supposedly pass a levy. Yes?
It took 5 years to get my daughter's school handicap accessible, but it is 100% accessible for her. From the time that we found out that she would be in a wheelchair at 9 months till she entered kindergarten, they started construction on it. But they did, over a 5-year period, get it completely accessible. And with working with the school system in Memphis, Tennessee, we've got about 75% of the schools now wheelchair accessible.
They've really taken the requirements to heart. They've had the pressure
Yes.
to move ahead.
Yes. Now I'm working citywide to get the parks and streets
Great.
accessible, because I feel that she deserves a life on the outside just as well as everybody else.
Well, as many of you know, the city of Columbus was hammered the last 2 years with renovations to their curb ramps that should have been done over the last 7 years. And I mean, that was just purely a lack of commitment to doing what they were required by law to do. There was, a suit filed in Pennsylvania. All they had to do was pay attention and do what they were supposed to do. But they waited multiple years only to be sued here and have to go through the backlog of curb ramps that they should have put in over a 5-year period and do them in a 2-year period, which took a big bite out of their capital budget for that 2-year period of time. But that's what happens when you don't do what you're supposed to do. Yes.
My question is how much accessibility do you demand? My son really to open a door really needs a button.
Okay.
So, am I my rights to ask school to provide, you know, the money.
You are within your rights to ask the school for anything. You are not within your rights to demand things that are not in the law.
Right.
And the school can readily point to the fact that in the ADA accessibility guidelines, buttons to open doors is not in the law. Okay?
So it's like as long as they provide someone to open the door for him.
Right.
That's how they meet it.
Right. They have to make sure he gets in the door. And buttons to open doors are $1,500. I mean, they're nothing. They cost literally nothing in comparison to a lot of other expenses. So why they wouldn't put one in, I don't know. But if people refuse to do things that are not in the ADA accessibility guidelines, then they meet the legal criteria of accessibility, even though they don't solve the problem for the individual. A good example of that is restrooms. Restrooms in public places have certain dimensions that exist in the ADA, and they meet those dimensions, and that's all well and good, but there are devices that people are riding around in these days. They're not all in sports wheelchairs like me. You know, they're on these big scooters that have got baskets and all kinds of stuff all around them, and those things don't fit through the doors or in those restroom compartments. But the law says that you have to have it a certain size, and they do, so they meet the law, and they will be considered legally accessible until the law changes to accommodate larger things. Now, another thing about restrooms is that we've gone to a situation where more and more people with attendants are out and about, and quite often those attendants are not of the same sex. So what do you do when you've got a male that needs an attendant who's a female, and you got a choice, a men's or women's restroom to go into? That's a bad thing. And so what they've gone to in many arenas, particularly and large gathering locations, concert halls, etc., is family restrooms. They've identified them as family restrooms. They're a single restroom area that's size-wise big enough to be accessible, and it's got a lockable door, and it's either sex, so that you don't have that problem in those facilities. Now, that's not required by law, but most facilities in renovation today, or who are being newly constructed today, have realized that that's a good thing to do, so they're doing it even though it's not required by law. That's why I say you're perfectly within your rights to request what you need, because they might do it, even if it's not required by law. Anything else that's pressing before you get a half an hour late start on getting your kids and getting dinner?
Yeah, it was just reported to me that Maureen is laying down on the mattress. She's out cold, and your kids have taken over.
Storytelling. Thank you for your time and patience, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Make a format for myself to get more involved with kids that seem to need art more than other kids. I've worked in different countries with kids from every different socioeconomic level, and the most successes that I've had are for kids that really seem to need the arts for some reason or another. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the power that I think that art has for people. And we could also call this the art of possibilities. I work with different not-for-profit groups right now that with maybe 8 different projects. One of them that I want to show you here on the videotape is when the organization is going to have a fundraiser, and then they give me a certain number of kids that I meet with over 8 or 10 different weeks. We work on one project together, put it in their auction, and then the money that's raised from that goes back to the organization. The whole project for me starts and ends with the kids. We do have a piece that goes into the auction, so that is a focus of it, but all the actual benefits of the project for me take place with the kids. I just wanted to show you this video here, and you can see how much, how easy it is for people to get involved with different issues when the format is so gentle, like children's art is. You can talk about all kinds of things, difficult issues, when the format is really easy for people to approach. In this little video, I was working with kids with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and they had a big auction coming up. So we picked about 5 or 8 kids that wanted to work on a piece, and it got a lot of media. It was just a really easy way for the community to find out about what was going on in a really non-threatening way, and I think it drew a lot of people to the event. Let's see if I can get this out. So the issue that they're talking about in this is juvenile diabetes.
As you can see, diabetes is a dangerous disease. It's also often misunderstood. 170,000 people are expected to die from it this year. 10-year-old Katie Helms from Western Springs is just one of the 16 million Americans battling the disease and fighting to find a cure.
I have type 1 diabetes, and that is when your pancreas stops producing insulin, and you have to give yourself shots and stuff like that so that you can live. Type 2 diabetes is when you still have a little bit of insulin and you need to take pills. So type 1 is a lot more serious. I was diagnosed August 19th, 1996, and I was 6 years old. I was 5 years old. It was a couple days before my birthday and a couple days before school started. I started crying when I found out, because I'm like, oh, Mom, you can't be telling the truth. I don't have diabetes. And my mom said, well, we have to go to the hospital. So I started crying because I had never really stayed in the hospital for a long time. But once I got there, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Well, I explained to everybody I meet, well, not like everybody I meet, but everybody that I hang out with, everybody that I go somewhere with, they all know about diabetes. And I go around the school telling each classroom about diabetes and what would happen if I got low or something like that. This painting is going to be used in the JDF, Juvenile Diabetes Foundation gala. It's really fun doing this. I love painting, and it's my way of giving money to the researchers. And it's just really fun doing it, and I think it looks really nice. It makes me feel really special. It makes me feel part of something when I do this, because I know that I'm giving it, and it's going to be money for the researchers, and they can buy more things to find a cure. And that's the main thing, a cure. I really want to find a cure. Whenever we make wishes, like birthday wishes, or eyelash wishes, or something like that, I usually do a cure for diabetes.
We wish for that also. Joining me now is Jim Tyree with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. You're not just wishing for a cure.
So you can see when they're working on these things, it's so easy for the kids to talk among themselves about what they have in common. These are kids that haven't met each other before. They're working on something that they're feeling really good about, and as they're going through it, they're realizing that they're really going to make a big contribution too. So it's just great in a lot of different ways.
And for their own care. ABC 7 Sarah
These are just different news groups that heard about the project and decided to come out.
Every Wednesday evening, they meet at a Western Springs church to contribute to a cause that is intimately important to each of them. The artists, ages 7 to 15, are joined together by a single disease, juvenile diabetes. The painted glass and other artwork will be sold to raise money for the Greater Chicago chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation.
When I paint these, and everybody does, we're going to sell it for money, and money is what's going to help us find a cure for diabetes. It's what we give the researchers so that they can have more equipment.
I can't really help in many other ways, since obviously it's hard. I can't really make a lot of money in a job. So this is the way I'd hope to raise funds for the cause. I can't really donate in any other way, so this would be my way of helping out.
The artwork will be made available for a silent auction on December the 8th, when the foundation holds its annual gala at McCormick Place. Diabetes is a disease that 16 million Americans must live with. And of that number, 1 million suffer from type 1 or juvenile diabetes. The majority of them are children.
Oh, it's like if you get way too low or something, you might like faint, and someone has to save you by giving you this special shot called glucose, and you have to take special insulin, and it's a bigger needle.
Creating artwork not only helps
It's
in a
pretty easy
monetary
to
way,
hear
but also
some
has
pretty
its
serious
therapeutic
things
effect.
this way when
I think
they
it
turn in the
boosts
middle of
their
work.
confidence in talking about diabetes and letting everyone know they have diabetes. And when the days get tough and they have hard days with diabetes, we bring up special events like this and say, remember how you did that, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if you didn't have diabetes. So it's kind of a perk of having diabetes.
The youngsters who are contributing to the Juvenile Diabetes Gala on December the 8th. Some artists you should know. Art for you, ABC 7 News.
So I've just, you can probably tell that this is just a really fun project for me to work on. Let's see, going through here. The artwork that I've been working on seems to work for, did I skip one here? Yeah, seems to work for kids in a number of different ways. Like I said, it's primarily for the kids. And one thing that it does for the kids, it's just an activity that everybody else does. And it's just another thing that they can come to and have fun with. We try to set it up, keeping in mind ahead of time what their different challenges might be. In the case of the diabetic group, we had a number of people that were there all the time because they were pretty brittle. And obviously that's not something that I'm willing to undertake. So we try to make it as normal as possible. They have a lot of time to just, we don't rush things. They have a lot of time to just enjoy themselves, make things be as creative as possible. They find out through projects like this how they're really similar to all these other people. They find a whole community of people that they didn't know about before, people that are in their own neighborhood and they didn't realize were having the same concerns that they were. And they also realize how they're much more individual than other people too. It's wonderful. And by being able to make things like this and participate in something that they feel is a weakness, it's just completely empowering for them, and they do really feel like they're making a big difference. When I am working for a different group, the thing that happens for the group is that if they decided to work on one project, then all of these different adults come together too, and they start talking about how this project's working, and then they get into conversations about what their children need. The group just becomes stronger too. It encourages them to try different ways of having the kids get together, and you can see that it gets outside people interested too. And with this particular group, diabetes has a huge visibility, and that's not as much of an issue for them as this is. This kind of group really could benefit by teaching more people about it. It's benefited just by teaching parents more about it, but if you get it out there to the community, that could even be more helpful. When it comes to art in the community, it's just such an easy way to tell people about what programs are coming up. You know, they're much more able to listen when it's not a threatening, scary situation, can learn about the condition, and just art as a general communicator is easy, and it's a terrific way to get other people involved. I was just so surprised to find out how many people are really generous people and want to give and want to donate, but the format just isn't there for them to jump in and participate. And when it's children's artwork, they're just right there. It's just so charming. This is that particular piece that we were working on when we put it into that auction. The kids were there for that, and when it's on such a grand scale, they really feel strong. Then it can be a tiny scale too. This is a holiday card. Mary Kate worked on. And another one she worked on. The inside of this says, look for the greatest pleasures in the smallest things. Yeah. So on this trip, I just want to say that my connection here is really through Mary Kate, and the Callahans and the Collatas have been just hugely wonderful. And I want to thank them so much for donating all the supplies and getting everything together here for projects for the kids to work on. And I've just had a terrific time with the kids. I hope they're having a really good time too. They're just full of life. We've just had some fun. What they're making in there is one big collaborative piece. They're getting together 4 different times. Everybody's making individual things. We're cutting them out, putting them on one giant piece, and by the end of the weekend, we'll have one finished piece that I'd like to get postcards made of and send everybody so that they can use it to remember the friends that they made and the time that they spent working on this project.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's it.
What's the medium they're using?
They're working in there on acrylic paint tonight. That's the really messy part. And then one thing I love are water-soluble crayons. They're very forgiving. And what else? That's pretty much it this weekend. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mm-hmm.
So I know you're located in Western Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, you know, people know Rachel. We've done other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But how could we in Cleveland do this? You're in Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that the Callahans have done on a smaller scale is Mary Kate just makes a lot of art. And then those pieces are put into their family's fundraiser. And
Like making Christmas cards or something like
right,
that would be
right.
really, and then we can sell those.
That's exactly right.
A
Calendar, I
all
have
the kids.
like 8 different programs, a million things I've thought out, just very easy ways for people to. What I'd like to do is just make a list of everything and send them out to you.
Could you auction paint something on like eBay? Something?
I have a website that supposedly is able to be set up for like a cyber gallery, which I've been dying to finish. Scan kids' work in. I would hold a body of artwork, scan the work in, and then it would be available for corporations to purchase. And then they would know who the organization was, who the child was, the organization was, what the issue was. And then, so they would read a bio on it, see the picture, and then purchase, and it'd be shipped out. So that's definitely a goal.
I would be more than willing to donate the substantial resources of the Transverse Myelitis Association. I'm saying that facetiously. But what I would be willing to do is work my butt off to organize and coordinate with the families to try to make something happen like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, I think what you're describing in terms of the value for the children finding a way to express feelings
Mm-hmm.
is, critically important for these kids. If they even organize some way for the kids to get together wherever
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
located to do
Mhm.
something and have parents organize that kind of activity. That would be a really neat thing to do, maybe get contributions from around the country or from around the world.
Right. I do have another plan in mind. One of the other programs is set up so that, and it was again developed for the diabetic group, but we haven't started it yet. They're set up so that they have different chapters located across the country. The one in Chicago was successful, and what we were thinking was to make it more of a national effort. So I would have this national revolving exhibit. I would take three entries from each group, so every group had a participating vested interest in it. And then as each group had their fundraiser, the whole exhibit would rotate around. Then it would be a really easy way to bring media in and really pump up the product. People could get to know the kids and their issues. And nothing could be purchased until the complete end of the show, and then it would just be sent out to who had purchased. Like, say, Columbus had 3 entries. Those are the 3 that people could purchase or corporations could purchase. And then I always think much bigger than I am, but then they also have an international foundation. And if it went well here, wouldn't that be great to do an international sharing like that also?
We do, and that's why this weekend is so sad for me, because we have so many families around the world who wanted to be here so badly. We have a very active membership around the world, parents who are really committed, and we could do that. We just need the energy and the focus and the coordination to make it happen.
Well, children's art spans every language. You know, you could take it to absolutely every country and people would feel a tie into it.
So what are you saying? Everybody would do like their own art and send it to you?
I would
It
set
would
a
be
format.
completely separate?
I would set a format so that the things that came in all met certain,
It'd be certain size.
certain medium, or whatever, or certain themes, universal theme, so that everybody would be able to tie into it in its own way, see how connected the whole show was, but how individual the person's entry into that would be. So.
It sort of reminds me of the PTA, if you're familiar with that. At least in Ohio, we have this reflection from the PTA. And one year, my son won, and it was right after Rachel. It brought me to tears. I forget exactly what it was, but wouldn't it be great, or I forget what it was, but then you had to follow that theme, and it was if you believed in angels, and he's, you know, drew an angel around Rachel walking, and of course she couldn't stand or anything at that point, but I mean it was just so cool. And if you picked a really cool thing like that, like whatever every year there's a whole new topic. I hold in my hand, and then you finish it.
Right.
And everybody has to sort of start like that, and their own creativity.
There is one group that I'm not that familiar with, but it's called Very Special Arts. Has anybody heard of that? It's a national organization. And from what I know, they have individual chapters. I know there's one in Chicago. I don't really know much about what kind of teaching they put together, but if you look on their website, they're always doing shows. I think they just call for submissions. There's just a general question put out there, how this disability has affected my life. And they just get an outpouring of entries, and I think that they just generally locate them in Washington, D.C., which is where their headquarters is.
I was going to say the personal experience with my daughter, Mary Kate, who's just, it has been so beneficial to her self-esteem, all the things that as us parents want to build in our children. The self-esteem, like an example, like the Christmas card up there. One of my friends contacted me and said, can Mary Kate make my Christmas cards this year? And she goes, and I insist on paying you. So Mary Kate, drew that picture with Gloria of the Snowman. And she paid, Mary Kate, and then that went into our foundation. And the benefits just ripple. I mean, the Claudia Foundation, we have an annual golf outing, and Mary Kate produces about 3 pieces of artwork, and we put them in the auction. And people are hounded over it, bidding out each other.
Bidding wars over that.
And it's not even just family members or friends, like people from corporations. Like we had an advertising, a guy that just attended the golf outing. I didn't know him. He had been brought by someone else, and he said, I wanted my coworkers to see that painting that Mary Kate did, because they gripe and they moan and they whatever, and he said, I wanted to point right to that and say, you know what, that was painted by a girl that is 5 years old, she was 5 at the time, and is paralyzed. And he just wanted that so bad. He didn't get it because someone else bid up.
Now that may be the case too, but I have had literally tens of thousands of kids, and Mary Kate is just one of the best and brightest. And the thing is that nobody would know that there was a disability of any kind, because making artwork is something that kids just can do, period. And it doesn't matter if there's an issue. And that is something that they can look inside themselves with and just become bigger and better with, and or if they want to compete with it, they can, because
She was
there's
5 when she did that. That's amazing.
yeah. She's something.
The Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, Randy is in touch with Lori, Mary Kate, and they want to make cards. But that can involve your children too, where the art would be, put into